Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain, Randy Wright speaking, and as always, I'm joined on our state-of-the-art radio program by my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seat belts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while Jeremy and I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before we may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, we see that the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court, is at it again. They had two monumental decisions today, one in which they shot down the Texas abortion restrictions, saying that it was creating an undue burden on a woman's ability to go out and have an abortion. Then, more importantly, in some regards, they are once again fighting to restrict our fundamental and inalienable right to keep and bear firearms, as is safeguarded by the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. This time around, in the case of Voisine v. United States, they are trying to say that those who are charged with having committed domestic abuse can be permanently deprived of their fundamental and inalienable God-given right to keep and bear firearms. This is a major problem, because if you stop and think about it, let's say that you have committed a crime, let's say that you are guilty of the offense that they are attempting to use to block your right to keep, procure, own, and bear firearms, shouldn't you be allowed to have your rights back once you pay your dues to society? Once you've gone through all of that? Shouldn't that be the way that it works? I didn't realize that this sin of committing a crime was something that we should just hold against someone for the rest of their lives. I know that that's not entirely what this decision was centered around, but it is what the Supreme Court did, and it was what they were trying to say. And I agree with the dissent that was penned by Associate Justice Clarence Thomas when he said that the only right in the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, that we treat in such a cavalier manner or with such great disregard to its sacred position or sacred place as a fundamental right is the Second Amendment. We don't treat any other God-given, fundamental, and inalienable right in such a fashion. And it's troubling. And the reason I say it's troubling is when you stop and think about what it is that we are putting on the table, it is a fundamental right. We have so often mentioned that on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, because of the great magnitude and weight and importance of our rights. Think of the slippery slope that this creates. Sure, it may sound good on the surface. We want to keep guns out of the hands of those who have harmed others. But what about those who speak out against the government? What is to prevent this rogue, tyrannical, and illegitimate government under this disastrous regime of Barack Hussein Obama from encroaching upon our First Amendment? What's to prevent them from saying that we don't need due process anymore? We've already heard the Joe Munchkin senator, the Democrat communist out of West Virginia, along with his buddy Chris Murphy of Connecticut, say that the due process clause is killing us. Both of the due process clauses, for that matter, the ones found in the 5th and 14th Amendment. In other words, they're upset that the Founding Fathers were keenly aware of this sort of twisted machination, this idea that entropy would set in and that old adage comes up. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Everywhere we turn, we see that they are doubling down or redoubling their efforts to strip and deprive us of our fundamental and inalienable rights. And it must come to an end at some point because, look, it is a very dangerous situation that we find ourselves in. When we become complacent or lackadaisical with respect to our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, we are giving the government carte blanche to essentially step upon, trample upon our rights, and that is intolerable. It's unacceptable. Our founding fathers would be rolling in their graves if they saw what this rogue, tyrannical court is doing. And the decision that was handed down was a 6-2 decision, folks. And of course, that's not to be unexpected because of the passing of Associate Justice Antonin Scalia earlier this year. But what it shows is just how precarious it is when we rely on an unelected bunch of justices to decide these matters through a power that is not even enumerated to the Supreme Court within the confines of Article 3, which designates and enumerates the power of the court. Again, all of the problems that are facing the United States of America right now, as I speak into this microphone, is rooted in the fact that we have divorced ourselves and distanced ourselves from the ultimate supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what is commonly known as the Supremacy Clause, is the Constitution itself.
I have a big problem with this ruling. Specifically the 6-2 decision pertaining to domestic violence or domestic abuse. And the problem is this. Here in Michigan, we have state law regarding domestic violence and domestic disputes. It is mandatory for law enforcement officers to arrest all parties involved. Now, here's the problem. Let's say an individual is separated from their spouse for whatever reason, adultery, irreconcilable differences, so on and so forth. They're going through divorce, or even if they're in a domestic relationship and they break up and they part ways. What's stopping one or the other spouses and their new significant others from going and causing problems for the other spouse, and that other spouse defending themselves? Because, well, look, I'll put myself in a situation as a hypothetical. Okay,
all right.
Let's say me and my wife separate, whatnot. She gets involved with another guy. That other guy is big macho guy. He's like, well, I'll make sure that Jeremy can't do anything and this and that, blah blah blah. Comes over to my home, my domestic dwelling, and brings the ex-wife over, or the separated wife, and he starts a fight with me, and then all of a sudden he brandishes a knife or a firearm, and I shoot and kill him, or shoot and maim him, or whatever the case is. Guess what happens? Because of this ruling, I have to forfeit my firearms now, because I'm defending myself. And I will never be able to own a firearm ever again. There's a problem with that. Because we have the right to life. We have the means and the right to defend ourselves and our property. And that supersedes any Supreme Court ruling. That supersedes any state statute. That supersedes anything and everything except the Constitution. Why? Because in the Fifth Amendment it is specifically enumerated what our rights are that cannot be deprived without due process: life, liberty, and property.
And what's so funny about this, Jeremy, is it goes against prior Supreme Court precedents.
Yes,
when the Supreme Court came out and said that it is not the duty of the police to protect you, essentially what they're saying is, if you have made a mistake, if you have committed a crime, and then have paid your penance for it, and then can be stripped of your fundamental and inalienable right to self-defense, who is to protect you? If you can't protect yourself, and it's not the duty of the police officers to protect you, in other words, what the Supreme Court has done in this 6-2 decision is essentially left these people defenseless. It's left them to be an open target. And oh, by the way, since these convictions are public record and can be looked up, it means that they have essentially been forced into a gun-free zone. And you know how we feel here on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, about gun-free zones. We believe that this is what creates soft targets, and the criminal element is not going to care. And let's say that it's an erroneous claim, a false claim, or a frivolous claim that has been foisted against someone, much like in Jeremy's scenario that he just mentioned. In other words, what they're doing is they are not really providing due process. They're not really allowing there to be equal protection under the law. So we see already that this decision is per se violative of the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the United States Constitution. It turns against itself. It goes against the whole notion of equal protection of the law. Again, I thought the whole notion was, with respect to our representative Republican form of government, that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men. In other words, the law is meant to apply to each of us in equal fashion. But what we see with the way that these Supreme Court decisions are being made is that they are disregarding that. And then let's turn just for a moment to the abortion case because of one of the arguments that was made by Justice Breyer. Justice Breyer said that the Texas laws had to be shot down because no matter how much regulation you put in, some bad actors are always going to slip through the cracks. Well, could not that same argument, that same line of reasoning and logic be applied to this Second Amendment case, particularly with respect to those who have been alleged to have committed domestic assault or abuse? You see, that's the thing. The court is speaking out of both sides of its mouth. It, much like the mafioso quafioso, is being consistently inconsistent here. This is not good, logical, sound reasoning. And the other aspect of this that bothers me with the Voisine v. United States case, the one in which they are stripping and depriving individuals of their fundamental and inalienable right to keep and bear firearms, and thereby also violating the Equal Protection Clause found in the 14th Amendment, is that what they're doing is they're showing that the so-called conservative justices, Justice Alito, Justice Kennedy, and also Chief Justice John Roberts, decided to go in with the gun-grabbing big government majority. It was only Justice Thomas and Justice Sotomayor, oddly enough, who were dissenting in this. And I think that Justice Sotomayor's dissent was not even on the same grounds as Justice Clarence Thomas's. I think hers was more down the lines of it would disproportionately affect insular and discrete minorities or people of color. But either way, their dissents are working in tandem, coming to the correct conclusion, the logical conclusion that is applicable in this type of case.
Well, again, this opens up, like you mentioned, it kind of a revolving door of criminal activity. You're creating a situation where an individual, and let's go back to the scenario, the hypothetical that I put out a few moments ago. What happens is that if my estranged wife's new beau, whatever you want to call him, new boyfriend, new fiance, whatever the case is, what happens is if he plays out in that scenario plays out and I don't kill him, but I maim him for life, causing great bodily harm. Maybe he gets paralyzed. I don't know. But he's no longer functional. I've been stripped of my rights to defend myself. Therefore, I'm in now a gun-free zone, essentially. My home becomes a gun-free zone. What's stopping any of his or all of his family members from showing up and breaking into my home and killing me?
Well, they're going to say that you can call the police. But as I mentioned earlier, the Supreme Court has already ruled that the police are not there to protect you.
Exactly my point.
Here's the thing. It's going to really make the defense of self-defense become all that much more apparent and important. We've got to place even greater weight on it until we can get this sort of madness that's being handed down from the bench sorted out. And again, this is why the Article 5 Convention of the States that we've seen so much mentioned about, and one of the things that the governor of my home state, Greg Abbott, mentioned is if 2/3 of the states vote upon it, that they could overturn a Supreme Court decision. We need that sort of thing in the mix here, because what we see is that this is the federal government once again trampling upon the ability of the sovereign individuals to exercise without fear of governmental retribution or incursion upon their fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And I know it seems that we place so much impetus on this, and I want to make it clear that we are not saying that we support domestic violence or that we believe that these people should not pay their dues. However, where does it stop? Where does it stop? Because if you start this journey, you're going to go down a slippery slope in which all other fundamental and inalienable God-given rights are placed on the table. And that reminds me of something that Dr. Ben I'm a Victim Carson said at the close of last week. He basically went before the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media by appearing on an MSNBC program in which he said, "I don't see a need to have the Second Amendment. Second Amendment, we should put it on the negotiating table."
Well, here's the thing. He must have taken that from Trump's playbook because, again, that word negotiate. This is non-negotiable. Period. Anybody says otherwise is full of excrement. And that's just the way it is. Our rights are non-negotiable. And like you said, Randy, where does it stop? Where does it stop? If they're able to strip us of our means and our God-given rights of self-defense, well, guess what? That means that they can just march right in, make any kind of ruling they want, to silence the people, take away their First Amendment rights, all of them, not just the freedom of speech, take away our Fifth Amendment due process rights, take away our Fourth Amendment rights to be of privacy, no legal representation in courts anymore under the Sixth and Seventh Amendment. They can impose any kind of punishments that they want, which would be violative of the Eighth Amendment. And let's move right on to the Ninth Amendment, where they decided to say, you know what, the states don't have any authority anymore, so we're going to take over the states. And we're going to basically say, well, this is how we view your constitutional rights. This is what they mean. They don't mean what you think they mean anymore. So we're just going to go ahead and interpret them the way we want to use them to violate all of your other previous rights.
And you see, that's exactly what they're doing with the abortion case.
Yes.
By going after the Texas laws that were designed to prevent the sorts of things that happened with Kermit Gosnell back in Pennsylvania. What was that, 2 or 3 years ago? Something like that.
4 or 5, maybe.
Oh, has it been that long?
Yeah.
Anyway, it was designed to stop that. And they're saying that that's not important. And this is a rather dubious right that they're basing this on, a so-called right to privacy, and then extrapolating that to a right to abortion. Again, you will find a right to abortion in Article Non-Section Existent Clause 0. It is not in the clear and concise language of the supreme law of the land, or in other words, it's not found in the United States Constitution. And that's a problem. We see that they are playing lip service to a right that is not well-founded, and they are tearing apart a right that is found in the black-letter law of our shared United States Constitution. And I have a major problem with that, Jeremy, because it is going against everything that we hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. It's part of that Fabian socialist scheme and agenda that they come hook or crook, they will do anything to tear this nation apart at the seams, to strip and deprive us of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And why? What does it come down to? It's all about power and control. Now, I know that I've oft-times reiterated that on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence the Wright Flyer, but it bears repeating here because what they are attempting to take from us is sacrosanct. It's something that is not able to be taken away without proper due process under the law. And I believe, as you mentioned with the Michigan law, and there's a similar law here in the state of Texas about the domestic violence thing, that it doesn't really provide due process. They're allowed to take it whether you're convicted or not.
And again, that points out to the discrepancies within the courts contradicting themselves yet again.
Mm-hmm.
What law was it that they upheld as being constitutional? Lacey's law, I believe, regarding Lacey Peterson and Scott Peterson murdering his wife and unborn child. He was
Right.
charged with double homicide.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because his unborn child was considered to have the right to life, according to the Supreme Court. So how is it that they can say, well, unborn children have constitutional rights, such as the right to life, but yet turn around and make this kind of decision and says, well, people that have an abortion is a right too. So you can't have your cake and eat it as well. It's either you preserve the right to life or you don't.
Right.
And they don't have a choice. They must follow the Constitution. They must be in pursuance of that. All rulings have to be in pursuance of the Constitution. Both of these rulings violate the Constitution umpteen times. And again, it points out to their inconsistencies. Why don't they just change, the Supreme Court of the United States from the to the Trump Supreme Court of the United States? They're becoming consistently inconsistent, just like Trump. And it's maddening because these individuals are expected to be held to a higher standard. They're supposed to be the ones that have the wealth of knowledge pertaining to the Constitution and the laws to be able to decipher the difference between good law and bad law in accordance to the Constitution, but they fail at doing so. The only individual on the Supreme Court that has stuck to the Constitution to the best of his ability is Clarence Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt. Has he made mistakes? Yes, but he's not perfect. He's human.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about the Voisine case is what it centered around is the particular language that was involved in the statute that was in question. Namely, the question of law came down to whether their past convictions qualified under the statute. And the statute is one of those like the one you mentioned in Michigan. And we see that it goes down to the mens rea. Now, folks, give me a moment here as I explain a little bit in legal parlance how a crime is defined. There are significant elements, specific elements that you have to meet in order for a crime to be found. There's the actus reus, which is known as the guilty act, and the mens rea, which is known as the guilty mind. And it must occur within a particular time frame. Because if it doesn't occur within that time frame, then it's not a crime. But here, it's going to the mens rea. That's what they were arguing about, because it was an argument as to whether recklessness, which was not in the statute, would be reason enough to warrant a lifetime ban on possession of a firearm, which at least as of now is a constitutional right. Now notice that the Solicitor General, Iana Einstein, said is at least of now a constitutional right. That tells you right there, they're telegraphing exactly what their intent is, exactly how far they want to go. I have a major, major problem with that. And I agree with Thomas when he said that we are too cavalier with this right. It is the only right contained within the Bill of Rights of the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution with which we treat with such contempt, with which we ignore with carte blanche. And so we see that both of the men that were arguing this case had argued that they were not subject to Section 922G9's prohibition because their prior convictions could have been based on reckless rather than knowing or intentional conduct, and thus did not qualify as misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence. And notice here, they are infringing upon your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights over a misdemeanor, not even a felony.
Well, I'm going to throw a wrench into the works here, okay? And this speaks directly with the mens rea. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Having malice aforethought, or having, preconceived notions of knowing what you're doing. How can an individual know that they're committing domestic violence if they don't know who the other individual is, and they don't find out until after the fact?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because under state law, it's basically any relative of the individual who you're having in a relationship with. So if my wife's brother, or let's say one of my wife's cousins, that I've never met before, I have no idea of their relationship, shows up, causes a problem for me because he comes to the aid of my estranged wife. He gets, upset that, we parted ways, we did this, and he doesn't like some of the things that I said to her, or she said to me, or whatever the case is, on either side. And he shows up, and then that scenario plays out. How am I to know that I'm committing domestic violence if I don't know the relationship of that individual? You can't charge the individual with that because, again, it's not known. You have to know what crime you're committing in order to be charged with that crime.
But you know what's going to be so predictable with the left and how they respond to your statement there? They're going to say, and they always fall back on this, that lack of knowledge with respect to the law is not a defense. The problem is that the law allows there to be an encroachment upon a right that requires due process to be removed. And how can there be due process when someone is essentially charged with something that they could have no way of knowing, at least not in reasonable fashion, to know that it met the parameters of this law that is poorly written? That falls into the category of cruel and unusual punishment found in the Eighth Amendment. So we see that not only does it violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, it also violates the Eighth Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Yep. It also violates due process. It also means that you're not really going to have a chance to face your accuser.
Sure. And not only that, but not have the chance of legal representation, because what's going to happen is not true legal representation or a fair trial, because at that point we've seen all too many times incidents like that, or scenarios like that, have been thrust in front of the court of public opinion. We can name numerous incidents. Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, Eric Gardner. What's this last? I can't remember. I mean, we can even go back. We can go back to the 80s. Freddie Gray, yes. We can go back to the 80s and 90s. Look at Malice Green, Rodney King. Now, were those domestic violence disputes? Not really, but it still follows the same mold of ushering in the court of public opinion. And when that happens, that weighs in. Nobody can ever get a fair trial with that. It's not going to happen. So, again, like we mentioned earlier, it's a snowball effect of all of our rights being violated. Even at some point, we could even look at a very minuscule point, to some degree, the Third Amendment being violated, because now what happens is if you're awaiting trial, you're out on bond or bail or whatever, now you have police officers basically invading your home, invading your privacy, being, possibly court ordered there to watch over you. I mean, we've never seen that, but again, where does it stop? I don't put anything past these crooked bastards. I really don't.
Yeah, and to take away your rights based on a misdemeanor, let's see how ridiculously we can draw this out using the Socratic method. Well, not true Socratic method, but using the type of logic stretching that the Socratic method is designed to get at. Now, folks, for those of you who don't know, the Socratic method is used in law school to basically stretch the logic of an argument to its breaking point. And they do that through a series of questions. So let's start with a question. All right, it's a misdemeanor that is based on domestic violence. What is the definition of domestic violence? Going after a spouse, a family of a spouse, or a domestic partner, what have you? Okay, let's say that the brother of your spouse or domestic partner is driving a car that you don't recognize. He cuts you off, tries to basically stop you, and you get angry and have a little bit of road rage and rear-end him. Okay, now all of a sudden that's domestic violence. That's grounds to strip you of your fundamental and inalienable right to keep and bear firearms, even though no firearm was used in the incident, no firearm was used or even thought about being used. You see,
or even present.
Yeah, so all of a sudden we have something that's not even there. You don't have the actus reus of abusing the right to, exercise of your right to keep and bear firearms. You don't even have a mens rea to misuse that. All of a sudden, we're punishing somebody for an unrelated crime. Guess what, folks? That becomes a bill of attainder.
Yes.
Article 1, Section 9 prohibits that.
Yeah, and we could even make an even more obscure scenario. Not having your dog licensed. Failure to have your pet licensed in accordance with state
and on a
laws.
leash.
And on a leash. Okay.
It runs out and bites the brother.
Yeah. And so they want to charge you with domestic violence and this and that, but then they try and let's even just leave the domestic violence out. Let's go right back to stripping individuals of their rights without due process because of a misdemeanor. Not having your dog licensed here in the state of Michigan is a misdemeanor. Trust me, I know. I know. It carries up to 93 days in jail and a $150 fine. But the point is, again, where do they stop? If they're willing to use something as a misdemeanor to strip people of their rights, what misdemeanors are they going to stop at? Where do they draw the line?
Is it going to be a Class C, such as a speeding ticket? Could a speeding ticket now be used to deprive you of your fundamental and inalienable rights? Let's not just stop with firearms. Let's say that they take away your freedom to exercise religion, your freedom to gather, to peaceably assemble. There
the right
are
to petition the government for redress of grievances.
Right. This is such a dangerous path we're going down, and it's always the path of unintended consequences. Yet when you look on social media, to a lot of the commentary sections on the articles covering this or the Facebook posts dealing with this, you'll see people saying, good, this is a first step towards logical common sense gun restrictions and regulations. No, you frothing at the mouth morons. Good common sense gun regulations, you nitwits, is found in the Second Amendment. The right of the people to keep and bear firearms shall not be infringed. I don't see with the caveat of unless you're a domestic abuser, unless you're an alcoholic, unless you're mentally ill. I'm sorry. Where in the Second Amendment is that? Where? Please point it out to me. Where it's in the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the United States Constitution. Now, before you say that that means that there can be no change made to it, sure there can. Look at the way that the 18th Amendment was turned down. Now, the 18th Amendment was the prohibition of alcohol and the possession of alcoholic beverages. Well, not really the possession, but the purchase of, which was passed in 1919 under what was commonly known as the Volstead Act. The only way that they could get rid of that was to amend the Constitution pursuant to the terms and conditions found in Article 5 and the preamble to the Bill of Rights. Mm-hmm. We see that that is the way that you would have to go and limit the Second Amendment if you were to go down that route. You would have to get 3/4 of the states to go along with it. Good luck.
Yeah, the fat chance in hell of that happening, because I'm going to tell you right now what's going to happen. Should it come down to that, you will see the state legislatures promptly be removed from their seats. Whether through election cycles and them being unelected, or through recalls. Now, this is an issue that I have with regards to the Constitution. There's no provision in there that allows us to recall our state senators, i.e. the ones that are sitting in Washington, those 100 individuals that just, for some reason, don't understand what's going on. They really have a problem with what's going on. They're not thinking clearly. They're not representing we, the people. That is their job. And it also translates down into the state.
You want to know why there's not that provision? Because prior to the 17th Amendment, the way that the senators were chosen was by the state legislators.
Yes.
And by the way, the state legislatures could recall them at any time.
Right. At the behest of the people, because the state legislatures only have their power and authority because of the people of the state. And if you need further clarification on that, go look at the 10th Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
It states it specifically.
And so, you see, again, it's why Article 5 made it so difficult to amend the Constitution. But the 17th Amendment is part of that block of amendments that were just horrible. We're talking here the 16th Amendment, which gave us income taxes. The 17th Amendment, which wholly destroyed our Federalist system as we knew it. And the 18th Amendment, which got rid of the right to have alcohol.
But the 18th was repealed.
Yes, by the 21st Amendment. I think the 16th and the 17th should have been repealed as well.
I'm inclined to concur with you on that. And I'm going to take it a step further. With regard to the people having the authority or having the power of the states. Again, in the 10th Amendment, it specifically says, powers not delegated to the federal government nor prohibited to the states, or prohibited by the Constitution to the states, are reserved to the states and or the people respectively. Okay? Nowhere in there does this mention the word rights. Nowhere. And see, all these people, they want to say that, well, it's a states' rights issue. It's the states' rights to have an Article 5 convention or not. No, they have the authority to do it, but they have to draw that authority and act on that authority at the will of the people. The only subject in the entire Constitution that rights are attached to are we the people. Period. So with individuals saying, "Oh, the 10th Amendment, it deals with states' rights." No, it deals with delegated authorities to the states, delegated powers. That's it. So it's up to the will of the people to have the states get involved in and go forward with an Article 5 convention. Not so much the legislatures. The legislatures get their power from the people.
And what's so troubling about all of this is that we see that there are so many who are sitting in the halls of Congress, or both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. For instance, that stupid sit-in they had about the no fly, no buy, or we cry, especially if you mention due process. That just goes to show that these people are going out on a limb to strip and deprive us of our rights. They are protesting our ability to protect ourselves, our ability to enjoy a right that has been with us since 1791, and actually before that, because the entire spark that ignited the American War of Independence, that long, drawn-out, bloody affair that separated us from the nation of Great Britain, much like Great Britain separated itself from the European Union, was when they came to take our firearms, when they came to encroach upon our rights. Now, let's tie in the Brexit issue to this, because it's very easily done. The reason that the Brits were so upset, at least the English. I know that the Scottish and the Irish were a little more on staying with the EU because they're delving a little bit more into socialism. But the reason that they were upset was these unelected bureaucrats who sat in the Parliament of the European Union, or EU, could overturn their Supreme Court decisions and their Constitution. You see what the problem is there, folks? that is dangerous. That is going against the will of the people. And if it's bad enough that a federal level government, a centralized authority, is too far detached from the people to really follow the natural law tenets that underpin an open and honest free society like that of ours, which is the longest contiguous, uninterrupted, constitutionally endowed republic in the history of mankind, then what do you think a global or multinational type of governmental body would do to the rights of the people? They would encroach upon it. They would do it to enrich themselves because they would fall into corruption. Again, that old adage comes into play here, folks, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's what we're seeing play out not only here at the United States, but in the global arena of politics as well. And we see that they do this in incremental fashion because it is a Fabian socialist-infused ideology that is being foisted upon the peoples throughout the world. This is why Alexis Tocqueville, that great French philosopher who had such admiration for early America, came out and said that those who are the proponents of any flavor, form, or facet of socialism are in fact nothing short of New Age feudalists, that they want to micromanage the daily facets of our lives from the cradle until the grave.
That was Hitler's whole agenda.
Of course.
To create a one-world government, to where he was sitting at the helm, to where anything that anybody did that opposed him and the Reich, he just squashed them. And he didn't even have to achieve the global authority that he set out to do. He did it in small strides. In what, 5 years of being elected?
Right.
So we've seen the dangers that have been presented to we the people and to the world through history. And now we're looking at it coming right back around in our face again. The question is, what are we going to do to stop it? If we cannot rely on our own government to stand up and represent the people and follow the tenets of what a constitutional representative republic is, and the unalienable tenets and the foundational rights of natural law, if they're not willing to do it, they're willing to just run roughshod over the people, and then you get the other branches of government involved, and all three branches of government are equally at fault for this. Every single one of them. And again, I point back to Clarence Thomas as being the only Supreme Court justice that actually understands the Constitution. Yes, has he made some wrong decisions? Of course. He's human. Mm-hmm. And the thing, this is the neat thing about the Supreme Court with the concurring and dissenting opinions. The dissenting opinions is basically those justices voicing their opinions, saying, no, we can't do this, we shouldn't do this, it's wrong for us to do this. And I've read several cases to where dissenting opinions have been very adamant about this. We can't do this because it violates this right. But yet the Supreme Court makes their ruling, and they have a majority rule to violate people's rights. I perfect case in point that ties in with all of this, both decisions regarding the overturning of the Texas laws regarding abortion, or shooting that down, and this case on the Second Amendment. Let's go back and look at I'm just drawing a blank. Roe v. Wade. Mm-hmm. Roe v. Wade ties into this perfectly, because the whole impetus of Roe v. Wade was to protect privacy between a woman and her physician or doctor. They used that to backdoor in abortion, also setting a precedent to where they can trample or use people's Fourth Amendment rights to subvert and disparage other rights retained by the people.
Mm-hmm. And it was an extension off of the 1960s case of Griswold v. Connecticut, where
Yes.
it was shooting down an anti-contraception ban, or an anti-contraception law, and it was all based on this right to privacy. Again, it was what Justice Douglas referred to as the penumbras of the Constitution, or the shadows of the Constitution. Again, that is not the place to look for rights. And this whole idea of a substantive due process clause, yes, I understand the importance of safeguarding rights, but to find rights that are not contained within the four corners of the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution is tantamount to violating the Ninth Amendment. Because it's basically saying that all of a sudden these rights are not God-given rights, they're governmental-given rights. That's what the Fabian socialists are really seeking to achieve in engaging in this type of conduct and engaging in this type of logical fallacy. And it's because they want control and power. They want this top-down governmental system in which they can basically dictate how the government's going to react and how your rights are going to play out in the greater scheme of things. And when we see that what's going on with the court, this idea that they can make these decisions, you mentioned the dissenting opinions. You know what? The dissenting opinions are not considered binding law, but they have been used successfully as persuasive arguments to shoot down the same law later on down the road.
Sure.
So do not think that we are going to give up the fight here. Do not think that we are just going to surrender on this. This is an issue that will need to be fought over and over again, because there are other pressing legal questions that come up. Okay, let's say arguendo, meaning arguing that this line of reasoning stays in place from the Voisine opinion. What happens to the guns they already owned? Do they have to turn those over? Is the government going to give them equal value or fair market value for those firearms? Otherwise, I have a feeling that that would be violative of the Fifth Amendment's prohibition against an unlawful taking, because it's property.
Also, it would be ex post facto right off the bat.
Of course it would. Be ex post
right
facto
off the bat.
and a bill of attainder.
Bill of attainder. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And see, this is, again, why it is imperative that we, the people, the ultimate wielders of sovereignty, have a fluent working and knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution. If we were to take each individual article and clause and amendment and break them down, which we've done previously, and go through each sentence and each word and explicitly define each word with the intents that are outlined in the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers by the Founding Fathers, those who wrote the Constitution, it becomes evidently clear exactly what those words mean. An example, the Ninth Amendment. The rights the enumeration of rights in the Constitution shall not be used to construe nor deny others retained by the people. Well, let's take a look at the word construe. What does the word construe mean? It means to interpret. Therefore, you shall not interpret certain rights to use those rights, or to use an interpretation of a certain right to abridge or violate the rights of others. The other rights enumerated in the Constitution. This is the problem. They're using the Second Amendment and interpreting the Second Amendment in order to disparage the rights held by the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment due process, the 14th Amendment due process clause at the state level, and as we've mentioned, the 6th, 7th, 8th, 1st, and even the 10th Amendment.
And they're even using Article 1, Section 8 to disparage the rights of the people as well. So they're essentially turning the Constitution against itself, much like the ACLU founder said.
Sure.
And
use it
what
to
that
destroy it.
Yes. And so that shows you the duplicitous type of nature of the type of people that we're dealing with here. They are working at this from a faulty premise from the get-go, because they know that their twisted machinations would never be accepted in the marketplace of ideas if they had to go and do this in a logical fashion. So we see that they use knee-jerk reactions. They try and say, just look, these guys are domestic abusers, and therefore they automatically have this stigma. And what's the rights of a domestic abuser? Well, put yourself in the shoes of the accused. Because it is not out of the realm of possibility that one is falsely included or accused of committing such an offense. And the way that this is just a misdemeanor, what does that mean next? That when you have a misdemeanor for, let's say you don't have your protest permit in order, and you're protesting something that the government's doing. You're protesting some governmental action, and they arrest you for a misdemeanor disturbing the peace. What, now you have no right to ever speak again? Sure. You know, it may sound ridiculous here, but that it based off of the logic here and the arguments that were made in the majority opinion of the Voisine v. United States case, you could sit there and argue that abusing your free speech right is enough to have it to where you can never speak again.
Let's take it a step further. Look at all these hate crime laws that they're trying to pass and have passed. Hate speech. You say something that's off color to an individual, they take it the wrong way, they get offended by it. Now you get charged with a misdemeanor for violating hate speech. Here's the thing. That is completely contradictory to the First Amendment. You have the right to speak freely, but as long as you're willing to accept the consequences for exercising your rights. Now, the caveat to that is, you do not have the right to not be offended. I live in Flint, Michigan. Predominantly black area in Michigan, okay? North of Detroit, south of Saginaw. If I was to go onto the north end of Flint, and some African Americans there, black individuals, start calling me a cracker or a honky, or whatever the case is, do I have the right to press charges against them for hate speech? Because, well, I don't like being called that. No, I don't. Because they are exercising their right to speak. Some people should never open their mouths because it only makes them look like the fools that they're first thought to be perceived.
Donald Trump.
But just because somebody gets offended does not allow you to infringe upon a person's rights in the least bit. And I've mentioned this next example previously. Yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. Do you have the right to do that? Absolutely. Now there's two consequences that can happen. A, you get some idiot that has no idea what the right to free speech is, and you yell fire, nobody bats an eye, nobody gets up and does anything, nobody gets injured, nobody gets hurt, but yet they charge you with a misdemeanor of disturbing the peace, or possibly even try to hit you with a felony of a terroristic threat, or inciting a riot, reckless endangerment, so on and so forth. But yet, how can you charge somebody if there's no injury or damage? You can't.
Because again, there's no actus reus. It
Exactly.
goes to the elements of a crime, and that's the thing that we're seeing with so many of these new laws. They're trying to either take out the mens rea element or the actus reus element. And that's a major problem. It's a major problem because it is going to allow the government to have essentially carte blanche to trample upon our rights without any due process, without any consideration under the court of law, without any notion to equal protection under the law, and without any application of due process. It's staggering to think that that could happen in the land of the free, but that's exactly what we're facing right now, and decisions like this Voisine v. United States that was decided today just show that that's exactly the sort of danger that we're facing. And yes, they can try and say that a slippery slope argument is based on a logic flaw, but it's not really a logic flaw when their entire premise from the get-go was based on a faulty premise. They have shown themselves to be willful in their conduct, to be willful in their attempts to strip and deprive decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizens of their fundamental and inalienable rights. And then if you take the Pulse gay nightclub incident, we see that they want to afford greater protections to the Muslim population, trying to say that not all Muslims are that way, and that we shouldn't apply that to all Muslims. But when they go after our fundamental and inalienable right to keep and bear firearms, due to whatever machination that they put forth, and irrespective of the fact that we are popular sovereigns in this country, they want to do a carte blanche blanket statement. They want to paint that with the stereotypical broad brush to make us all look as though we are raving lunatics. In fact, that's when Johnson there at the Department of Homeland Security was coming out and saying that, based on Salazar, the mayor of Austin, Texas, saying that conservatives or radical right-wingers, which they didn't even define in the meeting minutes, are just as dangerous, if not more so, than Islamo-fascist terrorists. So we see that they don't like our rights, but they also, at the same time, want to empower those who have dedicated themselves to the utter annihilation of the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people. I have a major problem with that.
I'm going to take it a step further. See, I don't think it's just their agenda to completely get rid of actus reus and mens rea. I think what it is they're twisting it to basically metamorphosize it into meaning something else. They're hijacking it, okay? Just like they do with the rights, and you just brought up a great example with that. You know, more rights and protections and tolerance should be given to the Muslim community because not all Muslims do that, but yet if you own a gun, you understand the Constitution, you carry a copy of the Constitution with you, and you don't deviate from that, in fact, you teach people what their rights are, you're considered to be a radical right-wing extremist. Again, with the freaking labeling of from the propaganda. That's exactly what it is. And they're using the labeling to institute extra constitutional rights upon a group of individuals. They're creating a protected class which violates the Equal Protection Clause. More so, that protected class is now given more protection because, well, this is how mens rea and actus rea, apply to them. Again, going back to the hate speech. Somebody gets offended, well, you intentionally offended that person, so there's the malice aforethought of doing this and doing that and blah, blah, blah. Wrong. That's not how it works. See, they only want to apply it to certain individuals that they know will follow them and go toe-to-toe with individuals and be at their beck and call, basically being the bullet stoppers when the TFH, or whatever it is,
LMAO,
WTF, STF, it's when it comes down to brass tacks, and it's coming this way, folks. Unless we observe what's going on and we recognize it and accept the reality of the situation. See, our country is ours. It belongs to us. Our republic belongs to us if we can keep it. It's up to us to keep it. The more people fall into this trap of being tolerant for this and politically correct for that and sticking their thumb in their mouth and the other one up their derriere and hearing the sound of a bell, they're alternating thumbs because they can't think for themselves because everybody else does all the thinking for them. The longer we allow that to continue, the beatings will continue until morale is improved. Period. That's just the way it is. And if we don't stop now, if we allow this to continue, you think we have problems now? Wait 5 years from now. 10 years from now. Wait until we are all nothing but dust on the earth and our future generations and offspring have to deal with this.
It's going to be worse by tenfold because
Yes.
we've already seen that these people are moving in a relentless fashion, in an incessant fashion, to take more and more of our rights, and they make more and more excuses, and they obfuscate the truth, and they turn to their allies in the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media to continue this tirade and this rampage against our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And just as an aside, an example here, we know that Donald J. Trump is going forth to the RNC and has basically been saying that he wants to prohibit Texas Senator Ted Cruz from speaking at the convention unless and until Cruz endorses him. And there have been so many of the Lion Branch Trumpidians that have wanted to go along with that line of drivel that I've got a problem with that. Because we see here that it's essentially what is going to be tantamount to a governmental function. It's going in line with pushing for a government office, and they're trying to curtail an individual's speech. The ability to practice and exercise his First Amendment rights based on political machinations and maneuvering. I'm sorry. That is intolerable, it's unacceptable, and again, it kind of goes into line with the same type of reasoning that was put forth by the majority decision in Voisine v. United States. Because it's going down this line that if you don't curtail or you don't kowtow to a certain politically accepted norm, then you deserve to lose everything. That is the type of jackbooted collectivist mentality that they are attempting to foist down our throats, to cram down our throats. And it's diametrically opposed to the foundational image that our founding fathers had since the inception of this nation some 235 years ago. And if we start ignoring this, if we start turning our back to it, we are going to only have ourselves to blame for the ramifications and repercussions that are going to come out of this. Because when you go down that path, it is a very dangerous path that you go down. Because what is to stop the government from reaching further? And I know that that's the question we've been asking it all throughout tonight's program. But we want you to think about that, folks. We want you to really take that to heart and to think about it because, believe it or not, this is impacting your rights.
It goes right to the whole that age-old adage that says the nail that sticks up gets hammered over or hammered down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, folks, think of radio aviation excellence, the Wright Flyer, as the nail that gets missed. And these individuals, these curmudgeons, these troglodytic, heathenistic, sadomasochist, jackbooted Fabian trolls, well, they missed us, but guess what? They didn't hammer us over. No, instead, they stepped on us, and they got a very, very bad case of tetanus. See, that's how I'm looking at this. They won't dare try to hammer us down.
We're not the nail. We're the thorn in their side.
Yes. Septicemia, whatever the case is. It's going to be very, very bad for them. Okay? Because we're not going away. There's no miracle cure. There's no life water they can drink. There's nothing that they can do to get rid of us. They cannot and will not silence us. It is our obligation and duty to stay vocal about this, stay proactive, and we are not going to stop until we're God darn ready to. And that means never. We will never stop. Even after we draw our last breath, we will never stop. You know why? Because we have first-class passengers here on the Wright Flyer that will pick up the torch where we dropped it, and they will take it and run with it.
And it's part of our duty and obligation in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. When we really stop and think about what it is that is happening here in the United States, we see that this is what the Founding Fathers warned us about. George Washington warned us against factionalization. That's what Donald J. Trump has been doing all throughout this disastrous 2016 presidential election cycle. He has been pitting American citizen against American citizen, hopelessly dividing the gutless opposition party, or GOP's base. And then we see that the Hiawatha hussy Pocahontas III is there with the lone deranger, in Hillary Rotten Clinton, it looks like they're already getting their little rotten ticket going.
The leader of the free world.
Oh, dear Lord. But what it comes down to is it is our duty and obligation in our capacity as popular sovereigns to stand up for, to proactively maintain and safeguard our fundamental and inalienable rights. That's what our founding fathers expected us to do. That's the way that the natural order of things or the natural law system works. And this is why you find that people like Nerdface, "Boing me, Sanders, the Vermont Senator Flying Saucer, get me some Thunderboy liquor off of somebody else so I don't have to pay for it," would come out here and say that we don't have natural law, that he doesn't believe that. This is where the cancerous twin doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism come out hand in hand, singing "Kumbaya frickin' ya ya ya, we take your rights," because they want to goose step against everything that we hold near and dear in this country. And that it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Yes, it may sound good. This whole notion of let's take away guns from domestic abusers. Well, but it's only a misdemeanor. It's only a misdemeanor.
Well, I have a word. Actually, I have 4 letters that will actually put the kibosh on all of that if used properly. First 2 letters are N and O, forming the word no. It is the most universally understood single-syllable word in the human language. No. Now, I will either preempt or follow that up with the other 2 letters, F-U. Because my rights are not negotiable, Randy's rights are not negotiable, your rights are non-negotiable. And when people try to negotiate with your rights by way of Supreme Court rulings that will dwindle them away, trade them up for one and have one supersede the other, so on and so forth, no. They can go Farouk themselves, I don't care. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to allow it. What are they going to do? Throw me in jail? I hope they try. What are they going to do? Come and take me out? Send a goon squad to take me out? They may do that, but it's not going to stop what's going to happen.
Well, it's like from Star Wars, remember? You can strike me down and I will become more powerful than you ever realize.
That's right.
And it comes down to, you mentioned the negotiation. That brings us back to the rocket surgeon himself, Dr. Ben I'm a Victim Carson, saying that we should negotiate the Second Amendment. Dr. Carson, we should negotiate your First Amendment rights. See how you like that. We should negotiate your 14th Amendment, your 15th Amendment rights. We should negotiate. Hell, why stop there? Let's just negotiate the whole damn Constitution, since that's what you seem to be so willing to do. That's what you seem to be frothing at the mouth to achieve. If you had any credibility going into this, you have since lost all of it. You are not credible anymore. You have shown yourself to be a charlatan, a huckster, a sellout. But we knew that when you went and endorsed the candidate that built his house, built his campaign not on a house of cards, but on a Waffle House. It has got to come to an end. And this is why we here, we true constitutionalists, those of us like Jeremy and our first Air Marshal, Nelson Ward, and yours truly, are so sick and tired of having to deal with those that want to place our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights onto the bargaining table. George Mason, when he concluded, when he was called upon to help draft the Declaration of Rights for the state of Virginia, that we, the people, are endowed with certain fundamental and inalienable rights by our Creator, the God of nature, meaning that no earthly authority, no legitimate or rightful earthly authority, without due process under the law, can abridge, encroach upon, belittle, strip away, take away, destroy, or diminish our fundamental and inalienable rights. And unless and until we start to get back to that at all facets and levels of government, from the city level all the way up to the federal government, we are going to continue to see this death spiral that is afflicting the United States of America as Jeremy and I speak into our microphones right here and right now, accelerate and get worse.
And again, folks, it's like Randy said, it's going to be tenfold for our offspring, for our future generations. It is our job, it's our obligation and duty, it's our birthright to ensure that our republic stays intact and is better than what it was when we inherited it by being born and throughout our life's work as the ultimate wielders of sovereignty. It is our job and obligation and duty to leave this republic in the hands of our posterity, our future offspring, better than what it was when we got it. It's kind of like the whole notion of with the American Indian tribes, Native Americans. You know, when they go out hunting, they don't destroy the land because they know that it's going to be fruitful for them, for their future generations. They don't take away from it anything that they don't use. Whatever they take, they use. They leave it as if they found it. Just like we need to do, but we need to take that extra step and make it better than what it was. Everybody wants to talk about, especially the quaff waffler and the Waffle House vulgarian. Mm-hmm. No, we need to make America great again. Shut up. I'm tired of hearing it. Next time I hear Make America Great Again, I'm going to look at that individual that says it and say, you know what? Someone needs to make you smart again. Because that's what needs to happen. We don't need to make America great. We are great. To say that it needs to be made great again would be indicative of us saying that our country has stopped being great. Our country has stopped being smart. That's what's happened. We have allowed ourselves to become indoctrinated, and we have allowed revisionist history and political correctness to diminish the intellectual capacity of what our republic is and the ultimate wielders of sovereignty. It's time to make America smart again.
And how can you make America great if you don't even know what made it great in the first place?
Or found no value in it.
Yeah. We already know, based on statements that he made to the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media back in 2012, that he never read the United States Constitution from cover to cover because he, by his own admission, found no value in it whatsoever. I've got a major problem with that. Jeremy has a major problem with that. Our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, has a major problem with that. You, as decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizens and cherished passengers and audience members of radio aviation excellence, the Wright Flyer, should have a major problem with this. Because these charlatans, these hucksters, these con artists, these snake oil salesmen are doing everything in their power, not only to tear this nation apart at the seams, but also to strip and deprive you of your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And that is the primary impetus of all of the problems that we're facing in this once thriving and flourishing and, dare I say, vibrant representative republic and community of popular sovereigns of ours by these Fabian socialists. And yes, I am going to include the mafioso quaffioso himself, the quaff waffler extreme, in that category. Why? Because he is going out on a limb here saying everything is negotiable. And the statements put forth last week by Dr. Ben I'm a Victim rocket surgeon Carson prove unequivocally and undoubtedly that they are trying to whittle away our God-given rights.
I have a question that I want to pose to all the individuals that support Donald Trump. Whether they're regular listeners and first-class passengers on our show, whether they're listening to the show for the first time. And the question is very simple. It's very deep, but it's very simplistic. How can you, in good conscience and faith, support an individual that sees no value in the Constitution? Because ultimately what he's saying is he sees no value in you. See, without the Constitution, you have no right to life. You have no right to voice your opinion. You have no right to vote. You have no right to defend yourself. You have no right to due process. You have no right to a fair trial and legal representation. You have no right to not be encroached upon in a cruel and unusual fashion. If he sees no value in the Constitution whatsoever, how can he see any value in the American people, his so-called supporters and voting constituents? Now, I would love for the quaffwaffler, the hairpiece himself, to come on the show, and it doesn't even have to be him. It could be John Barron or John Miller. I don't care. And I would love for him to come on the show, 1, 2, or all 3 of them. They could take turns. I don't care. And I want that question answered.
I don't think either one of them knows how to answer it. And here's the other extension of that question that you put forth. If they're saying that this, and yes, it's like a hair extension, it's a bad hair plug, it's this. How can he be a nationalist movement? I've heard the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media reiterate this ridiculous nonsense ad nauseum. That he's got this nationalist, populist movement. How can he be a nationalist if he finds no value in the only thing that defines us as a nation? The supreme law of the land, the United States Constitution, defines our nation. It's the only thing that unifies us. It's the only thing that we are called to swear allegiance to. Yet throughout the primary process, we saw that on multiple occasions he called for his supporters to swear an oath of allegiance. And we see that he's carrying out that same type of dark, twisted, Trumptalitarian, stupid, quafftastic idea of encroaching upon free speech, going after and demanding absolute loyalty with what he's trying to do in preventing Ted Cruz from addressing the Republican National Convention there in Cincinnati.
Here's a question. Why in the blue hell would Ted Cruz even give him any kind of endorsement or support after the way Trump attacked Heidi Cruz?
Or his father?
Or his father. I'm actually beyond shocked that Trump didn't come out and attack his 2 little girls. I'm absolutely in shock that he hasn't done that. But of course, the night's not over, and it still hasn't come down to the November election yet. So there's still time for him to do that, which, man,
I wouldn't put it past him.
I wouldn't put it past him. But is he really that full of himself to think that after attacking an individual as viciously as he did, going after his family members the way that he did, that he would give him any kind of support?
Yeah, he's that arrogant, he's that narcissistic, he is a one-trick pony, and that pony died and was turned into glue a long time ago. You see, that's the problem with the quaffwaffler. He has no core values, he has no honor or convictions. And again, that goes back to what was it that our founding fathers considered the greatest thing that they put at risk? Honor. The greatest thing was sacred honor. Where in the hell and what in the hell has happened to sacred honor in this once thriving republic of ours? Why are we selling out our principles? Why are there so many that are calling for a tyranny of false unity, calling for the vast majority of the sentient American people to sacrifice their principles, to sell out their principles, to essentially sell their political soul to go for the lesser of 2 weasels? A weasel is a weasel. Doesn't matter whether it's a smaller weasel or not, both will kill your chickens. Both will come in and destroy anything that you've worked for. That is the false dichotomy, this faulty premise and narrative that they attempt to thrust down our throats. And we've seen it in election cycle after election cycle, and it is a threadbare and very tired and very nauseating tune that they're singing. It's so discordintal that it's giving me a headache even thinking about it.
Well, I've had enough of it. I'm tired of it.
Yeah, so
I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of it. And it comes down to, again, what is our solution to this? See, again, folks, our show is not about just bringing up the issues and bringing up the problems. We have to have a solution, and we offer that solution. Randy mentioned it earlier. Getting back to the core principles, fundamental understanding, and the tenets rooted in the natural law system, our shared constitution. That is the only thing that is going to preserve our republic. And it is done so at the actions and at the hands of we the people, because we are the ultimate wielders of sovereignty. Period. You cannot put your hopes and dreams in one basket, vote for Trump or it gets the hose again type thing. You just can't do it. It puts the lotion in the basket and the hair mousse and everything else enough. You cannot place your obligations on the shoulders of anybody, including Ted Cruz, to save this republic. It is yours, mine, Randy's, and everybody who holds citizenship. It is our obligation, it is our duty, it is our birthright. It was our burden to bear the second we drew breath.
And it was designed that way. Because if you stop and think about it, if you turn to a messianic figure, someone who claims to have all the answers, someone who claims to have the mystical power to come down out of Providence and ride their waffly syrup gondola down to the earth, that they can somehow magically wave their toupee and that will solve all the ills and problems with the country, that means they can destroy the country too. It means that their badly syrup can sit there and drown out anyone who has any love for their fundamental and inalienable rights. To be a free people is what America's about. If you ask anyone on the face of the planet, even those Durka Allah, Islamo-fascist terrorists, who are attacking us at any given moment, they will say that they hate our freedom. They hate the ability for the popular sovereign individual to act and think for themselves, to care for themselves, to reject their collectivist mentality. Enough.
And we're supposed to be tolerant of those individuals?
Why? Why do we have to be tolerant of those who are seeking our utter annihilation and destruction? Why do we have to support those who have no interest in supporting us and have no interest in living and let live? That is a major problem. That shows that we have become essentially, on a national stage, suicidal. Well, not all of us. Certainly not our cherished listening audience and passengers here on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. This is why our goal is to make America smart again.
Yeah, and if these individuals want to be tolerant to those certain groups of troglodytic, sand-pounding rejects, just social rejects. If you feel the need to be tolerant to them, why don't you do yourself and the world a favor? And trust me, it will actually make for a better topic in society. Go find a highway. Just any old highway will do, where there's a lot of traffic, okay? And then find the biggest truck that's moving at the fastest speed. Jump out in front of it and give it a big hug. Just give it a big, just embrace it with all of your tolerance. Love it and squeeze it and hug it to pieces. Because that's really all that your life boils down to at that point, because you are willing to tolerate those that want to annihilate you, because you're going to get some little modicum of safety and security, and it's going to make you feel good. It's going to make you feel happy. Oh, I got all flutterbys in my belly, and it makes me happy, blah, blah, blah. I feel so safe and secure, nothing can harm me. Wrong.
It's that same sort of ignorant line of thinking that brings about this faulty premise of our government is so benevolent that it would never stand against our rights. But have we not seen throughout these 2 disastrous terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime that our rights have been targeted on numerous occasions without relent, without rest? Yes, that's exactly what we see, because that is their end game. That's their goal. That's what their twisted machinations have been about from the very get-go, ever since he first assumed the reins of political power back in January of 2009. Folks, it is our duty and our obligation, and above all, our responsibility, to take this country back. Now that's not racist, that's not whatever they are going to try and obfuscate it to be, or whatever they try to put into my mouth, whatever words they try and put into my mouth here. No, we need to take it back from the bureaucrats, from the Fabian socialists, from anyone who would strip and deprive us of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Folks, we're coming up on Independence Day. It's right around the corner. It is at this time, perhaps more than at any other time, except for Constitution Day, that we need to sit back and think about what it is that our founding fathers, our forefathers, our ancestors gave up. What they were willing to go through, the hell that they were willing to trudge through so that they could hand down to their posterity our fundamental and inalienable rights as embodied in the greatest social compact or contract ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. Are we prepared to risk everything as they were? Are we prepared to do what's necessary? Are we prepared to do what they would call us to do?
That's a loaded question for a lot of individuals, Randy. And
I know.
And I say that with a saddened heart, because you and I, now granted, in our short time on this earth, we both grew up going through, the school systems and whatnot, watching certain things, such as the Pledge of Allegiance, no longer being said and recited in the classroom. Not even being taught anymore. The history books completely riddled with nonsensical crap that is completely contrary to what actual history is. I mean, it's a prime example of this is, I have mentioned this before, in one of my classes at the collegiate level, I asked my classmates, a few of my classmates, and even my professor, this one very important question. It had to deal with the class, and this, I can't remember what the name of the class was. It doesn't matter now. But the question, and I'll never forget this. I was going to be doing a report or a presentation on revisionist history. All part of, as a group, with the whole thing on education being a social problem. And that's what the name of the class was, social problems. So I asked the question, because it was very indicative or very pertinent to revisionist history, that topic. And I asked the question amongst my group, I says, who freed the slaves? And, there was only one person in my group that didn't answer because he knew better. But everybody else in my group, first words out of their mouth, Abraham Lincoln. I went apoplectic. I said, are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? Do you not know? And I asked him, I says, you just graduated high school, what, a year ago? 6 months ago? Did you not understand? Did you not learn about the 13th Amendment being ratified on December 15th, 1865? Were you not taught that? Well, we talked about, that pertaining to slavery, but Abraham Lincoln's the one who freed the slaves. How is that even possible when he was dead for 8 months?
Well, they try and construe it as being the Emancipation Proclamation,
Yes.
which was nothing more than an executive order,
Yeah.
which had no binding effect of law.
And
That's the amazing thing.
The conversation...
How little they understand.
Yeah, and the conversation became so heated to where the professor actually came over and says, what's going on? And I asked her the question. And she said the exact same thing. Abraham Lincoln. I'm like, are you serious? I looked at her and says, wrong.
Yeah.
Flat out, you're wrong. And she says, well, no, actually, I said, no, you're wrong. Abraham Lincoln did not free the slaves. And a lot of people would say, well, that's kind of a touchy subject. And I asked this of, individuals, African-American individuals that I have, and I do it to make a point. Because this goes all the way down with the revisionist history, but also the indoctrination.
Yeah.
And it's what LBJ said. And folks, I'm going to quote LBJ, not entirely. I'm going to, purposefully omit something, but you'll get the point. When he said this, and just to give a little bit of history to build up to it, LBJ was an opponent of the civil rights legislation for 7 years. 7
Yes, he was.
years. From 1957, when it was first introduced into Congress and everything, he voted against it. He, in fact, even engaged in filibustering it when he was Senate Majority Whip, when he was Senate Pro Temp, and then when he was even Vice President of the United States, he cast a tie-breaking vote because the Vice President of the United States is the President of the Senate, and when they're equally divided, he cast a tie-breaking vote to shoot down civil rights legislation. He voted against it every single chance he got. All of a sudden, Kennedy's assassinated. It comes up for legislation again, gets pushed through both houses, pass it. It goes to his desk. Now him as president, not vice president, signs it into law. Why would he do that? I'll tell you why. Because the following statement speaks volumes to that. He says, when I'm finished, I will have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
And that's what it's always come down to with the Democrats. It's always been about a vote. It's always been about self-aggrandizement. Again, this is why it's so important to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby your fundamental and inalienable rights. And that's what we are dedicated to here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Now, folks, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. I guarantee you she will not strip you of your alcohol, even if you become verbally abusive. As always, folks, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I've been joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. I want to take this opportunity to invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you may have either here on our YouTube page or our Google Plus page or our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find our departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, our Blogspot page that has audio blogs, and the Cafe Press account.
Oh boy, the Cafe Press account. Well, folks, I'll tell you what, there's no prohibition listed there on the Cafe Press account. I guarantee that. Go ahead and peruse it, shop, show your support for the show, show your support for yourselves. Show your friends and family that you are a first-class passenger here on the Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. And I'll tell you what, if something happens to where, you happen to buy a couple of our shot glasses and drinking glasses, this and that, party favors, so on and so forth, and you get to drinking and things happen and this and that, I'll tell you what, they will not be stripped of you. They will not be stripped of you, even if you do incur a misdemeanor. So they'll be there to be passed on down to your posterity, your future generations to enjoy for the long haul.
The right to keep and bear bars. Well,
there you go.
It's got to be there. Anyway, folks, as always, it's been a great pleasure having you. Hope to see you next time. Do take care.